Welcome to WikiPodcast. Today, we're diving deep into a truly pivotal concept in Islam, one that really bridges the spiritual and the temporal, the Caliphate.
And this exploration is especially for you, our listener, who's keen to grasp big, complex ideas quickly, find those surprising connections without getting lost in loads of detail.
Right. If you're interested in how religion and power intersect.
And we aim to provide clarity and hopefully some genuinely engaging insights.
Exactly. We've gathered a comprehensive overview of the Caliphate, pulling from, well, a really detailed source.
From its very beginnings through its various historical forms.
And our goal is to extract the core knowledge, those aha moments that shed light on this fascinating institution.
Our mission today is pretty simple, but profound. Understand what the Caliphate is at its heart, how it transformed over centuries, and why it commanded such immense religious and political authority for so long.
Okay, so let's begin right at the source. The immediate aftermath of Prophet Muhammad's passing.
A really critical moment.
This led to a truly critical and maybe underappreciated gathering at a place called the Saqifa.
The Saqifa. What's fascinating to consider is the initial discussion among the Ansar.
They were the residents of Medina who had welcomed the Prophet, right?
Exactly. And their first instinct was, well, let's choose a leader from within our own ranks.
Which makes sense. It speaks to their sense of ownership, their responsibility for this new Muslim community.
But that idea immediately raised concerns for Abu Bakr and Umar.
Key figures, prominent companions, Muhajirun from Mecca.
Right. And their worry, understandably, was about potential disunity. If leadership wasn't seen as unifying across these early groups, well, that could be a problem.
So Abu Bakr made an argument.
A powerful one. He suggested a leader from the Prophet's own tribe, the Quraysh, would likely command the broadest respect. Keep everyone together.
It was a pragmatic appeal for unity, really.
But then a counterproposal emerged.
Oh.
The idea of joint leadership. Quraysh pick one, Ansar pick one, rule together.
You can just imagine the debate that sparked. Pretty intense, I bet.
It was. And right in the middle of this, Umar took decisive action.
What did he do?
He just went ahead and swiftly pledged his allegiance to Abu Bakr.
Wow.
Yeah, a powerful gesture. It resonated, and many others there followed his lead. It really shaped the outcome.
So Abu Bakr achieved near universal acceptance as the first caliph. But it wasn't completely smooth sailing, was it?
No, not entirely. There was some initial resistance, which kind of highlights the delicate balance of power and influence back then.
Who resisted?
Primarily Ali ibn Abi Talib.
The Prophet's cousin and son-in-law. Very close relationship.
Exactly. And he initially declined to acknowledge Abu Bakr's authority. Given his closeness to Muhammad and potential backing from some Ansar, it wasn't perhaps totally unexpected.
It shows how personal and family ties played a role.
Definitely. And things reportedly got quite tense. There's an account of Umar confronting Ali to gain his allegiance.
Some narratives even suggest force might have been involved.
That's a point of historical debate, yeah. But ultimately, after about 6 months, they reconciled. Ali pledged his loyalty to Abu Bakr.
So this early period really shows the complex human dynamics involved in, well, setting up this new leadership.
It absolutely does.
And that leads us right into the succession of these early caliphs. And a really significant development, the emergence of the major sectarian divisions within Islam.
Divisions that still shape the landscape today.
Right.
What's striking is how things changed. Abu Bakr nominated Umar, his successor. Fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
But then Umar, the second caliph, was assassinated.
Oh.
His successor, Uthman, was chosen by a council, a majlis.
So a different process.
Yeah, and Uthman's reign also ended violently, assassinated by a disgruntled group.
Wow, a pattern emerging.
Then Ali assumed control. But as we mentioned, his authority wasn't universally accepted.
Right, from governors in places like Egypt.
And even some of his own guard. This plunged the community into the fitna.
The first Islamic civil war.
Yeah.
All about legitimate leadership.
It was a period of intense internal strife, major rebellions, and tragically, Ali himself was assassinated.
By a Kharijite.
Yes, a radical group that had broken away over interpretations of leadership and law. Ali's rule, though deeply significant, lasted only 5 turbulent years. Shows how fragile unity was.
And it's during this early formative time that we see the clear origins of the Shia sect.
The Shi'at Ali, the partisans of Ali, they fundamentally questioned the legitimacy of the first 3 caliphs.
Believing leadership should have stayed within the Prophet's family.
Exactly. While the majority, those who accepted all 4 Rashidun caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, they became the Sunni sect.
So these incredibly personal political events right after the Prophet's death laid the groundwork for the major branches of Islam we see today.
It's a stark reminder. Even in the earliest days, interpretations of leadership and authority differed significantly.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Even with all this internal struggle, this forging of different identities,
Yeah.
the Rashidun Caliphate actually started establishing symbols, a system of governance. Seems almost counterintuitive, right?
It does, but what's fascinating is this early cultural mixing, syncretism.
How so?
They actually adopted symbols from the Sasanian Empire, the Persians, things like the star and crescent.
Really?
Yeah, even depictions of fire temples, the Emperor Khosrow II. But they put their own stamp on it, adding the Arabic phrase Bismillah, in the name of God, on their coins.
Wow.
They also issued coins that looked kind of Byzantine, featuring the Byzantine Emperor Constans II.
A real blend of existing power symbols with the new Islamic identity. Talk about a visual of a world changing.
Exactly.
And how did they actually run things? Did they set up an administrative structure?
They did. It was pretty pragmatic for the time. Each region, sultanate, wilaya, emirate, different names had its own governor.
A sultan, wali, emir.
Right. And they were accountable to the caliph. It allowed for some central control over these huge distances.
And we can't overlook Muawiyah, governor of Syria, related to Uthman. He eventually succeeded Ali.
A pivotal moment.
Because he fundamentally shifted things, didn't he? Made the caliphate hereditary.
Exactly. He established the Umayyad dynasty, a definite move away from that earlier, maybe more consultative model.
Which, like you said, changed the whole essence of succession, setting the stage for centuries of dynastic rule.
It did. But before we jump fully into the Umayyads, it's important to look at the policies in the lands they conquered under the Rashidun.
Right, these weren't just military takeovers.
No, there were significant administrative and societal shifts happening.
What stands out?
Well, one key thing is they reportedly lowered taxes compared to the previous Sasanian and Byzantine rule.
Which must have helped gain some acceptance, surely.
Likely. And they also gave a fair bit of local autonomy to these governors, let regional customs continue somewhat.
And this might surprise some listeners, but accounts mention greater religious freedom for Jews and some Christian groups.
That's an important point. Generally, they allowed other Abrahamic faiths to practice, often in return for a poll tax, the jizya.
Relative tolerance for the time.
Yes, and that probably helped with stability. Plus, they brought peace to areas just exhausted by those long Byzantine-Persian wars.
Okay, so Ali's caliphate faced turmoil, sectarianism was brewing, and the stage was set for the Umayyads. How did that final transition happen?
Ali's reign, as we said, deeply troubled. The Battle of Siffin ended in a stalemate. Ali agreed to negotiate with Muawiyah.
Controversial.
Very. It caused a major split in his own ranks. About 4,000 people seceded. They became known as the Kharijites. Very strict views.
And Ali actually fought them.
He did, defeated them at the Battle of Nahrawan. But then, tragically, he was assassinated by one of them. Just shows the instability.
So after Ali,
His son, Hassan, was briefly elected caliph, but seeing the potential for more conflict, wanting unity,
he did something significant.
hugely significant, he abdicated in favor of Muawiyah after just a few months.
To avoid more bloodshed.
Exactly. An act that probably prevented wider war at a critical time, even though it ended his own claim.
So Muawiyah became the sixth caliph, and that cemented the hereditary Umayyad dynasty.
It did. That transition from Rashidun to Umayyad marks a fundamental shift from a model, in theory at least, of election and consultation.
To a dynastic system, hereditary rule.
And that would have huge repercussions for the Islamic world.
Okay, let's move into the Umayyad Caliphate then.
Yeah.
661 to 750. And as we said, the defining thing was this hereditary rule. A real departure.
Yeah, it totally altered the principles of succession after the Prophet, The title of Caliph became something passed down within the Umayyad family.
Which affected its legitimacy for many Muslims who valued that earlier consultative tradition.
Absolutely.
And this area is also known for massive territorial expansion, right? Unprecedented scale.
Huge expansion. Under the Umayyads, the Caliphate grew incredibly fast, incorporated the Caucasus, Transoxiana in Central Asia, Sindh,
Modern Pakistan.
right, all of North Africa, the Maghreb, and most of the Iberian Peninsula, Al-Andalus.
Just immense.
Yeah.
Arguably the largest empire the world had seen up to that point.
Pretty much. And to govern it, they divided it into provinces, appointed governors, standard practice.
But this hereditary rule, plus accusations of, well, impious behavior by some rulers.
It led to widespread and persistent internal opposition. Support wasn't universal by any means.
Makes sense. Moving away from the Shura, the consultation, was a major issue for many. Felt it contradicted early Islamic spirit.
Precisely. There was significant support for other leaders, like Zubair ibn al-Awwam, and a growing feeling that rule should have stayed with the Prophet's clan, the Banu Hashim, or Ali's descendants.
Fueling uprisings.
Exactly. Numerous rebellions, deep divisions, even within the Umayyad structure itself, like the rivalry between Yaman and Qays tribes.
And we absolutely have to talk about the Battle of Karbala in 680.
Cannot overstate its significance. A truly tragic event. Ali's son Hussein and his family were killed by the army of the Umayyad Caliph Yazid.
This became a defining moment, solidifying the Shia-Sunni split.
Absolutely. It remains a central point of huge emotional and religious significance for Shia Muslims globally. Crystallized the divide.
Powerful example of religious and political conflict intertwining with deep emotion.
It is. Ultimately, all this opposition from Banu Hashim's supporters, Ali's lineage came together, led to a revolution that overthrew the Umayyads in 750.
But twist ending.
Yeah, the Shia Ali, the party of Ali, were disappointed when the Abbasids took power instead.
Who were descended from Muhammad's uncle, Abbas.
Right. Shows the complex, shifting dynamics of power and aspiration back then.
So, the Umayyads fall, the Abbasids rise in 750. And this period, the Abbasid Caliphate, often seen as a golden age, especially with Baghdad as its capital.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Abbasids were also from Mecca, like the Umayyads. They leveraged the discontent to establish their rule.
And their reign did usher in this incredible era, didn't it?
Yeah.
Intellectual, scientific, cultural flourishing.
Remarkable advancements. Math, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, plus a vibrant culture, Islamic art, architecture, music blossoming. Baghdad became a beacon.
A global epicenter for knowledge, culture, trade, attracting scholars from all over. The House of Wisdom. Legendary.
Absolutely. A major center for translation, intellectual exchange.
But this amazing cultural peak, sadly, it didn't last forever.
No, it suffered a devastating blow in 1258, the sack of Baghdad by the Mongols under Hulagu Khan.
Horrific. A massive loss of life, knowledge, culture, effectively ended Baghdad's reign as the Caliphate center.
It did. And even before that catastrophe, the Abbasids had started losing real control outside Iraq, hadn't they? Central authority was slipping.
Right. By around 920, their power beyond Iraq was much weaker, regional governors, local dynasties getting stronger.
And by 945, it was official. The Buyids, a Shia dynasty from Persia, conquered Baghdad. The Abbasid caliphs became symbolic figureheads.
So the empire fragmented. Lots of local dynasties popping up.
Exactly. But the Abbasid story takes another turn. Back in the 9th century, they'd created this unique army.
The Mamluks.
Right. Slave soldiers, mostly Turkic, Circassian, Georgian origin, fiercely loyal initially.
An army created to serve ends up taking power. Happens a lot in history.
It does.
Yeah.
Initially meant to provide stability, bolster the Caliph. But the Mamluks grew in influence, eventually overshadowing the Caliph. By 1250, they seized control of Egypt, set up their own sultanate.
So the army protecting the Caliphate becomes its de facto ruler in Egypt. Intriguing.
Exactly. And after the Mongols destroyed Baghdad in 1261, the Mamluk rulers in Egypt did something clever.
What was that?
To legitimize their own rule, they reestablished a symbolic Abbasid Caliphate in Cairo, brought a surviving Abbasid family member there, gave him the title.
Caliphate in name only.
Yeah.
Religious legitimacy, but no real political power for the Abbasid guy.
Precisely. They were religious figureheads, authority mostly symbolic. This lasted until the Ottomans conquered Egypt in 1517.
And that's the end of that Abbasid line. Sultan Selim I defeats the Mamluks, takes the last Cairo Caliph, Al-Mutawakkil III, to Constantinople.
He was indeed taken to Constantinople, modern Istanbul. The Ottomans then claimed the Caliphate title themselves, but the Cairo Abbasid line ended, a major shift in Islamic authority.
It's amazing tracing how the Caliphate evolved, shifted centers, changed its nature through these dynasties. Now, let's look at those parallel regional caliphates that popped up, especially as Abbasid power weakened.
Right, that fragmentation created a power vacuum. Ambitious local rulers stepped in, asserted independence, even challenged the Abbasids by setting up their own caliphates.
First up, the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba in Al-Andalus, 929 to 1031. Kind of ironic the Umayyads survived and thrived in Spain after being overthrown in the east.
It is. Abd-ar-Rahman I, an Umayyad survivor, set himself up as Emir of Cordoba way back in 756. Much later, facing the rise of the Fatimids in North Africa.
Another caliphate.
Exactly. Abdul-Rahman III decided to boost his own prestige by claiming the title of Caliph himself in 929, a direct challenge to Baghdad.
And this period is seen as a golden age for Muslim Iberia, right? Science, philosophy, art, trade flourishing.
Absolutely. Cordoba, under the Umayyad caliphs, was a major intellectual and cultural hub, a testament to their resilience. Then we have the Almohad Caliphate.
A Moroccan Berber Muslim movement, 12th century.
Founded by Ibn Tumar, they overthrew the Almoravids, established a powerful Berber state. Abd al-Mumin declared himself Caliph in 1147. More fragmentation.
They controlled a lot of territory.
At their peak, much of North Africa and Islamic Iberia, big regional power, but their dominance in Iberia faded after a major defeat at Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212, paved the way for the Christian Reconquista.
And after the Almohads declined in North Africa, the Hafsid Caliphate emerged, 1249 to 1574.
Right. They were initially Almohad governors in Africa, Tunisia, basically, declared independence in 1229. Interestingly, they claimed descent from Caliph Umar.
The second caliph.
Yes. Muhammad al-Mustansir declared himself Caliph later. Their caliphate even gained recognition from others after Baghdad fell, showing the power shift. Eventually got caught between Ottomans and Spanish, then conquered by the Ottomans.
And we can't forget the Fatimid Caliphate, 909 to 1171, Shi Ismaili, based first in Tunisia, then Egypt, with Cairo as their center, a direct challenge to the Sunni Abbasids.
Huge ideological and political challenge. They claimed descent from Prophet Muhammad through his daughter Fatima, asserted their own legitimacy.
Controlled a big area, too.
Yeah, parts of North Africa, Sicily, the Levant, even Mecca and Medina sometimes, generally known for some religious tolerance. But their influence waned, eventually overthrown by Saladin's Ayyubids.
It's clear. As Abbasid authority weakened, the caliphate concept fractured. Powerful dynasties claimed the title for legitimacy across the Islamic world.
Exactly. These parallel caliphates show the complex, often fragmented, political landscape of the medieval Islamic world. Diverse ways rulers legitimize their authority.
Okay, let's turn to the Ottoman Caliphate. A major power, holding the most widely recognized claim from 1517 until its abolition in 1924. The Ottoman sultans started using the title.
Well, it's interesting. Sultans like Murad, I used it informally earlier on, but their main focus was sultanic power. The real turning point was Selim I's victory over the Mamluks in 1517.
That brought Egypt under their control.
Yes, and crucially, the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. That massively boosted their claim as the top power in the Islamic world, the de facto leaders of Sunni Muslims. And they had the symbolic authority from the Cairo Abbasid line, too.
And the seat of the caliphate moved with the Ottoman capital, Edirne, then Constantinople, Istanbul.
It did. Later, especially in the 18th century, they used the caliph title more politically. Like after the Treaty of Kusuk-Kainarka in 1774, they claimed to be protectors of Muslims under Russian rule, using religious authority against Russian influence.
And even the British Empire supported their claim sometimes, for stability in British India.
Yes, the British saw the Ottoman Caliph as a potential unifier for Indian Muslims, which could help maintain colonial order. Strategic thinking.
Then Sultan Abdulhamid II, around 1880, really emphasized the caliphate title again.
Right, as a symbol of pan-Islamic unity, a way to resist European expansionism. It resonated widely, especially in British India.
So by World War I, the Ottoman state was the largest independent Islamic political entity, and the Sultan, as caliph, had influence beyond its borders.
Definitely. There's that fascinating story about the U.S. Secretary of State asking Sultan Abdulhamid II to use his caliph status to influence Muslims in the Philippines to accept American rule. Shows the perceived global reach.
But the long Ottoman caliphate history ended dramatically in 1924. Abolished. A huge moment.
Seismic event. After WWI, Ottoman Empire collapsed. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, founder of the Turkish Republic as part of his secularizing reforms, just abolished the caliphate constitutionally, March 3, 1924. Fundamentally changed the Muslim world's political and religious landscape.
Deeply controversial, and there were attempts to save it. It was offered to Ahmed Sharif as Senussi in Libya.
Yes, but he declined. Then Hussein bin Ali, Sharif of Mecca, declared himself caliph, hoping for Arab leadership. But his kingdom was conquered by Ibn Saud in 1925. Left the whole thing in disarray.
And during this debate, an Egyptian scholar, Ali Abdel Razik, published a book.
Groundbreaking book, 1925. Argued Islam doesn't mandate a specific government form, critiqued using the caliphate for political legitimacy, sparked huge debate.
Challenged centuries of traditional thought. Were there other revival attempts?
Conferences, discussions, like a Cairo summit in 1926, but they failed to reach consensus.
And today, we still see groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir, the Muslim Brotherhood, calling for its reestablishment. Even debates about Turkey's government potentially having ambitions.
Indeed, the idea of the caliphate clearly retains this powerful, though contested resonance for many Muslims.
Its legacy, as history and ideal, continues to shape discussions about Muslim identity, politics, faith, and governance today.
Absolutely.
It seems the concept also took on non-political forms, moving beyond just political institutions, particularly in Sufism and the Ahmadiyya movement.
That's a fascinating point. Within Sufi orders, Khalifa often means a spiritual successor or representative of a sheikh.
Leading disciples, managing local branches,
Exactly. A purely spiritual, ethical leadership role, not political at all.
and the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has a continuing caliphate, Caliphatul Masih.
Yes, they see them as spiritual and organizational successors to their founder, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, emphasizing divinely guided leadership for the community's unity and progress.
Again, spiritual and organizational, explicitly not political.
Correct. It's remarkable how the concept got reinterpreted in ways totally distinct from its political history.
But as a major global political institution, it's been largely dormant since the 1920s abolition.
Dormant as a unified political entity, yes, but the idea remains potent for many, a symbol of past unity, strength, shared identity. Plus, in Islamic eschatology, there are prophecies about a future caliphate guided by prophethood, often linked to the Mahdi.
We've also seen contemporary attempts to revive it politically, though unsuccessful and controversial.
Yes, there was that obscure, forgotten caliphate of Abu Isa on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border in the 90s. Faded away.
More recently, and infamously,
The self-proclaimed Caliphate of ISIS under al-Baghdadi in 2014 got global attention, but overwhelmingly rejected as illegitimate by mainstream Muslim scholars and communities, due to its violence and deviation from Islamic law on leadership.
which brings us to ongoing calls from certain Islamist groups for its restoration, using different methods.
Right. Groups like the Muslim Brotherhood advocate for pan-Islamic unity, which some see as implicitly including a caliphate concept, often working within existing systems. Hizb ut-Tahrir explicitly pushes for a global Islamic state via nonviolent politics.
And others.
Groups like al-Qaeda historically saw violent overthrow and establishing a caliphate as central. But it's crucial, absolutely crucial, to note there's also significant opposition to a restored political caliphate from many scholars and Muslims worldwide. They see it as impractical, undesirable, or theologically flawed today.
So to really get the caliphate's enduring significance, we need to look at its religious basis.
Right.
What do the Quran and Hadith say?
Well, the word Khalifa appears in the Quran a few key times. In Surah Al-Baqarah, God says he's placing a Khalifa on earth, meaning humanity, as stewards or vicealians.
Okay.
In Surah Sad, King David is called God's Khalifa, told to rule justly by divine law.
And the Istiklaf verse in Surah An-Nur.
Verse 55, often cited. Many interpret it as God promising succession and power to believers who do good deeds, seen as support for the caliphate idea.
Other verses used too.
Yeah, some interpretations of verses about ruling by God's law, like Al-Ma'idah 5.49, and obeying God, the prophet, and those in authority, and Nisa 4.59, are used to argue for Sharia governance under a leader like a caliph.
What about the Hadith, the Prophet Muhammad's sayings and traditions?
Absolutely relevant. Several hadith touch on leadership. One well-known one from Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal is often interpreted as prophesying two eras of caliphate following prophethood's guidance.
With maybe less righteous rule in between.
Yes. Other hadith stress unity, obedience to the emir leader, warning against breaking allegiance.
And the idea of the Mahdi's prophesied caliphate.
Right. In Islamic eschatology, many traditions expect the Mahdi, a divinely guided leader, to establish a just caliphate in the end times. Restoring peace and justice underscores the ideal of divinely sanctioned leadership.
And the actions of the Sahaba, the companions, right after the Prophet died at Caliphate.
That's considered foundational by Sunnis. The consensus, ijma, reached there on needing one leader for unity and well-being. Abu Bakr argued against having two emirs to avoid chaos. They agreed, selected him.
Even Ali, despite initial reservations, eventually acknowledged an emir was necessary for order.
Exactly.
And many Islamic theologians throughout history built on this, emphasizing the obligation for a caliphate, the impermissibility of multiple leaders.
Oh, definitely. Major scholars Al-Mawardi, Ibn Hazm, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah, many others, developed detailed arguments for a single unified leadership. Based on Quran, Sunnah, the early consensus.
Shia scholars agree on needing a leader, but differ on how they're chosen.
Right. They believe the leader, the imam, must be divinely appointed from the prophet's family, not elected. Same need for leadership, different understanding of legitimacy.
Okay, finally, let's touch on the general principles of government envisioned, or sometimes practiced, under the Caliphate. How is a caliph chosen?
Early on, it was a bit fluid. As historian Fred Donner suggests, maybe prominent men in the main kinship group electing one of their own.
But later?
The Sunni tradition developed the idea of the shura, the consultative assembly, respected figures electing the caliph, emphasizing consensus.
And traditionally, the idea was the caliph should be from the Quraysh tribe.
That was the traditional Sunni requirement, yeah, though not always followed strictly in practice. But Shia belief is totally different, the Imam doctrine. Divinely chosen, infallible imams from the Al-Bayt, no election involved.
And this Majlis al-Shura, the consultative assembly, it has Quranic roots.
Yes, verses in Surah Ashura and Al-Imran stress consultation in community affairs. The Majlis was seen as the body to elect the caliph, but also to advise him.
What qualified someone for the Shura?
Scholars like al-Mawardi stress knowledge, piety, sound judgment. Though modern Islamist ideas about the Shura's role vary a lot.
Another key principle: accountability of rulers. They weren't absolute monarchs.
Definitely not, in theory. While obedience to just rulers is stressed, Islamic tradition strongly emphasizes rulers are accountable to God and the law.
So could they be challenged?
Yes. Scholars discuss the permissibility, even obligation, to challenge, impeach, or rebel against unjust or ineffective rulers. Figures like Al-Ghazali, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani address this, but always with caution about causing more harm.
And the rule of law, equality before the law, was that a principle?
A cornerstone, yes. Hadith emphasize equal application of law, regardless of status. Punishments sometimes suspended in hardship. The principle was everyone, even the caliph, was subject to the law. Qadis, judges, shouldn't discriminate.
Caliphs appearing before judges.
There are historical examples, yes. Though historian Noah Feldman argues the later Ottoman codification of Sharia might have reduced the role of independent scholars in interpreting law compared to earlier times.
Lastly, economic principles and practices.
Well, the early Islamic period saw a Muslim agricultural revolution. Changes in land ownership, incentives, right to trade land boosted productivity.
And trade? Markets?
Early forms of proto-capitalism, free markets, merchant capitalism developed. A strong monetary economy based on the dinar facilitated trade. Sophisticated business techniques emerged.
And social welfare.
Zakat, the obligatory charity, was central, collected and distributed via the treasury, the Beit Amal, for social support. Caliph Umar famously set up allowances for everyone, men, women, children, early social support system.
Also linked to high literacy rates for the time.
Yes, the economic activity and emphasis on knowledge contributed to that.
Okay, let's unpack what this all means. We've journeyed through, over 1,000 years of history, tracing the rise, fall, transformations, the ideals of various caliphates, each leaving a unique mark.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The whole concept of the caliphate, it grapples with these fundamental questions that still resonate, don't they? Spiritual authority versus political power, just leadership, community, unity versus diversity.
From those intense early debates on succession
To the complex politics of huge empires and even those parallel or non-political forms. The caliphate's been this potent, ideal, and a tangible, often messy reality for so long.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener, trying to understand religion and power? Well, exploring the Caliphate's history gives crucial context for understanding the Muslim world's historical, political, religious landscape, past and present.
It highlights those enduring questions about faith and governance, the different ways Muslim communities have tried to organize themselves to find leadership over centuries.
Consider this final provocative thought. Given this rich, often contradictory history, the diverse interpretations, the glory, the fragmentation, its enduring appeal, what does its persistent resonance, even today, tell us about the ongoing aspirations and maybe the challenges facing Muslim communities worldwide as they navigate identity, authority, and their place in the modern world?
A lot to think about there.
Thanks for listening. Write us in the comments your opinion on the episode and what other topics you would like us to talk about. Subscribe to the channel to help us reach more listeners. Thank you, and have an amazing day.